Yo, yo, yo. Welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. I am your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. We're day 4 as I record, day 7-ish by the time this will come out on Schrodinger's Senator Watch, where we have a potentially alive, potentially dead senator. And because nobody's seen him, we don't quite know for sure. What a fun time to be alive. It's not at all ridiculous and exhausting to live in a time in which things like Mitch McConnell probably being dead are not even worth headlines anymore because it's just another thing going on. And because it didn't happen today, we've already lost our attention span with it. I'm doing great, everyone, as you can tell. I don't take much personal responsibility for jinxing this timeline we're living through, but perhaps I should have had something more optimistic than Your Therapist Needs Therapy when I started my podcast, because it hasn't been great. Today we're going to talk about, I think, just like the over, beyond the pale ridiculousness of modern America and how that's exhausting. How the overt evil of our modern times is readily apparent to, I think, everyone. Maybe not everyone. Again, we have to hold space for the incredibly unintelligent and the incredibly deeply propagandized. So obviously not everyone. But anybody who's paying the slightest bit of attention, I guess, which I think is considerably fewer people than I would like to think. Maybe that is part of my premise here that's flawed, is way less people. And it's just easier to sort of be a goldfish, I think. Which, again, I'm saying again, I think I've talked about on the podcast before, is incorrect. Goldfish do not have bad memories. That's a bit of a myth. That's based on the fact that if you abuse goldfish by keeping them in a jar of water that has no air in it, they will die. And we thought goldfish don't live very long and therefore don't have long memories. But really, goldfish live for a long time in the wild and grow to be quite large and beautiful in the wild, and also have perfectly functional memories in the wild. So stop abusing goldfish. And also, their memories are fine. Whose memory is not fine? Our current president, who's very obviously deeply into dementia. So the idea for this episode actually started as I was watching a cartoon, as I'm wont to do as a parent of children. And as a responsible parent of an 8 and a 5-year-old, I was pre-watching a cartoon to decide if it was too scary or not for them. My boys have certainly watched plenty of Batman the Animated Series, which is what I grew up on. It's the excellent, probably the best Batman to ever exist. I don't really think there's a debate about that. It's nostalgia for my childhood. It tackled really complicated and somewhat complex stories, not just for the time, but even still now holds up incredibly well. The artwork is fantastic, sort of the noir crime novella type setting, the sort of anachronistic. I don't think I've ever said that word out loud before. The vague timeline in which the series is set, somewhere between 1930 and 1990 when it was created. Who knows? Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as the Joker. Anyway, I could go on and on about my love of Batman the Animated Series, but that's not what I was watching. I was watching Batman Caped Crusader, which is season 2 just came out on Amazon Prime. And season 1 I really liked. I have a YouTube review of it. I thought it was really good. It's definitely darker in content. It has deaths, not like gratuitous on screen, but certainly more than I remember from my childhood. It's TV 14. I think the current season is TV mature. Season 1 was TV-14, so it's geared towards a older audience, more mature audience. And I was watching Batman Cape Crusader, and it was just sort of struck at how hard it must be to create villains in a show like that when we have the worst people in charge. And I've definitely used this example in other places, but Joe Manchin was sort of my example. This is going back to a simpler time. Trump 1.0, the Senate was sort of split 50-50 Democrat and Republican, and you had people like Kristen Sinema and Doug Manchin were sort of the swing votes, and they weren't Democrats at all. But I sort of would talk during Trump 1.0 is like, how far gone must we be where Doug Manchin, who is a literal comic book villain, I suppose I shouldn't hyperbole literal there, who is the human embodiment of every comic book villain trope imaginable, besides having an eye patch, was the person who was supposed to save our very crooked government and the swing vote for the good guys, quote unquote, in the Senate. What a wild time. And to think that was bad. Boy, was I naive. Literally, Joe Manchin was an eye patch away from being a Bond villain. He's an oil baron who made his money off of extracting his wealth from not just the physical labor of workers, but also from the planet, and exploiting that to a very high degree to the point where he owned a super yacht. These are not the people who we want to be representing us, and certainly these are not good people. And so I was watching Batman and reading some of the criticism online for season 2. People are not enjoying season 2. I'm halfway through. It's been fine. I really love the art style. I think there's hints at good stories that they're not really delving into in the way that Batman the Animated Series did, but I will probably do a full review of the season on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. This isn't an episode about Batman. This is an episode about the cartoony villains we have that we're supposed to pretend not only are not obviously evil, but I don't know, there's some discourse about whether we're allowed to call them bad or not. I don't know. It's exhausting to pretend these things are not readily apparent. And by watching Batman and being reminded of Batman the Animated Series, in Caped Crusader and Batman the Animated Series, the bad guys all sort of have like really dark eye outlines. That's how you know they're bad guys. There was an episode in this season where they were selling rocket technology to dictators from around the world, and there was one with an eye patch. That was the moment where it was like, oh, I have to do this episode, because it just sort of clicked into place for me. And yeah, put an eye patch. You don't have to put the dark eyes around it, because that JD Vance does that himself for aesthetic reasons, perhaps. It's a bit of a mystery how the right-wing dudes who are so weird about gender wear so much makeup. But yeah, I mean, they already have the dark eye outline. I think if you gave Pete Hegseth the big scar on his face, he would have to like have been in some sort of real danger for that to happen. Although I have a scar. Well, I have a scar from a childhood playground accident, which I guess was dangerous. Just to say, scars generally include some sort of risk. If you put an eye patch on Mike Johnson, again, these are so over the top, comically evil people that I want to talk about what sort of the mental block is on identifying these people as overtly evil, and also what it means for mental health to have to keep pretending that these people are not evil. And, you know, I've heard this line in other places. I couldn't quite track down the origins of they don't even have the decency to lie anymore. I know a version of it popped up in this show Andor, which is fantastic. And again, like I've referenced 2 shows so far, and it's like, gosh, don't think you should give your money to Disney or Amazon. Um, and also, what's the difference between posting on YouTube? Right? Like, I'm going to talk about these cartoonishly evil people, and then I have to use their websites to talk about them. Again, it's dystopian without the cool tech. I think it's dystopian with the cool tech. We just have a lot less neon than expected. And Trump is a really obvious one too, right? Whether it's a scar or an eye patch you put on him. Again, I think if you look at sort of secret lair covered in like gold, it's like, again, yes, I could draw a character like that in a cartoony way, or have it be my D&D villain that I run for my 8 and 5-year-old, and they would recognize instantly this person is evil. They've covered everything in gold. Dragons hoarding wealth are bad things throughout all of fiction. This is an understood thing. We as humans intuitively know that, right? And I'm not saying it's intuitive to know that somebody who wears an eye patch is evil. I'm saying we sort of dumbed down our narratives in fiction about what is evil to the point where when it's right in front of us, we can't notice it. The Mark Zuckerberg and Bezos and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel buying up land that is island properties for their secret bunkers, like that's just comic book bad guy layer. That it's not Dr. Evil with a volcano shaped into his face is the literal only difference there. And it wouldn't surprise me that in some of their secret hideaways, they didn't have personal idols in the shape of themselves, right? Again, an oil baron would be a bad guy in a cartoon show. That's a senator now. The billionaires are bad guys, and they own the platforms that I'm trying to talk to you on. The corruption is just so obvious and overt now. Here's a gigantic jet. Why don't you use it for your personal use? Here, I'm going to send my son-in-law over to rake in millions. We invested in your son-in-law's company billions of dollars so that you'll give us favorable treatment, perhaps even going to and starting a war for us. The corruption is just outright and documented. It's all illegal. It goes against at least the Hatch Act, if nothing else. And every Bond villain, most of the Batman comic book bad guys have some sort of personal affectation, an aesthetic that lets us know they're bad, right? It's the scar, it's the eye patch, it's the weird hair, it's the talking puppet, it's that you keep stroking that cat while you're giving your evil monologue. That wasn't a euphemism. Or I've never understood Catwoman if it was a euphemism. The personal affectations of Trump are like, yeah, his nude model wife who speaks with a different accent because she's from a different country. His weird hair is his personal affectation, his terrible tan. Like, if you took this out of the current modern context and put it in the 1960s villain, like, it's not that far off from Goldmember. And right, like, or I guess Goldmember's the Austin Powers one, right? It's been a while. The idea that Linda McMahon married to I'm going to use the word literally here, in literal cartoon villain of an evil boss, Vince McMahon, who covered up abuse of children for decades, who likely covered up a murder for decades, who played a cartoon version of himself as a bad guy on TV and then sexually trafficked and molested women who were under his employ as an actual evil boss. The idea that their billion-dollar corporation lets his wife, Linda McMahon, become the head of the Bureau of Small Businesses, not a small business, or the head of the Department of Education is, again, like beyond the pale. The satire is dead. We know these people are evil. Everybody who watched the Attitude Era in the 90s understood Vince McMahon as the boss who's abusing his power to give himself titles and prestige and enter the Royal Rumble and screw over Stone Cold Steve Austin, the working man's hero in real life, not a good person. That was obvious to us. Vince McMahon was the bad guy. The rich, wealthy asshole abusing his power is the bad guy. We know this. That's easy storytelling. And somehow, we're supposed to pretend that the guy with the really terrible tan, the obvious dementia, the terrible hair, who's quoted himself as being best friends with a known sex offender for years, who owned a beauty pageant and also was neighbors with the world's most famous sex offender. Like, what are we doing here? He just posted something calling out Abdul El Said in the Michigan primary as two different Americas, and he posted a picture of him and Melania and El Said's wife and himself, and it's just overt racism. Again, this is the guy who posted a meme of the Obamas as monkeys. Like, they don't have the decency to lie anymore. The corruption is obvious and ongoing. Like, anything Donald Trump has done to enrich himself in office is A, illegal, and B, would have ended anybody else's presidencies. The idea that the right wing was so outraged about Hunter Biden getting any sort of money, even though he wasn't a government official, but are okay with Jared Kushner giving money, is maddening, right? The reflecting pool nonsense. The idea that somebody who took pictures of the reflecting pool is a vandal, when we saw the corruption of Trump give a no-bid contract to one of his buddies who then did it really poorly, and they're going to do it again to fix it, because the grift isn't in fixing the monument. The grift is in the no-bid contract. And if they get the chance to do it again, they're just going to make all that money again, right? Like, it's just corruption. And we're supposed to go along with the song and dance of these people who took pictures of it. We're somehow the cause of it. We watched him drive an entire military parade of SUVs down the reflecting pool when it was drained, and we could see the tire tracks that left, and we're supposed to pretend like that's not the problem. And again, this is bad for our mental health. I hate to be like, comic books have taught us this for decades, but cartoons have figured this out a long time ago. And I'm somebody who's like critical of Paw Patrol as propaganda and Spider-Man as propaganda, and cartoons are not good moral arbiters, I don't think. And also, it's such basic storytelling to say these people who are incredibly wealthy and abuse their powers and have accumulated their wealth by abusing people are the bad guys. Doesn't even need to exist in comic books. It's just normal storytelling, because we as humans can identify those people who treat other people poorly for their own benefit are the bad guys. They are evil. And again, when you have one who is a former propagandist at Fox News, now in charge of the military, doing all this fake military nonsense, when you have one who watches porn with his kid and is proud of it, and is adopted a kid from another ethnic background but doesn't include them in any of their family pictures, whose spouse practiced bloodletting as a way to heal people's mental health issues, and he carries a giant cross around and lies every single time we see him, and that's supposed to be the religious version. Like, again, it is insulting to anybody's basic intelligence and or critical thinking skills to have to go through this on a day in, day out basis and be like, yeah, that seems reasonable. as somebody who grew up heavily propagandized in both the evangelical fundamentalist church and the Midwest of America, seeing dictators, seeing North Korea be shown to be like, yo, this dictator who's really bad at stuff isn't that ridiculous that he lies about how he has all these Olympic records? Isn't it ridiculous that all his family members get positions of power? Isn't it ridiculous that he puts on these military parades to make himself feel good about himself? Like, I don't know. I was raised with that propaganda. I don't know how the people who raised me with that propaganda can't look at what's going on in America today and say, uh-oh, whoopsies, it's possible we maybe have become the thing we said was bad. And part of this episode was spurred on by watching Batman villains be obviously evil and being like, ugh, that's just real life. Oh no, the police department is corrupt is like a lesson I've seen in cartoons since the 90s. Was talking to admittedly some older therapists, some folks who are not my generational peers, and having to explain to them that like they can't take the CIA seriously like they used to, and then having to be like, not that you ever should have taken the CIA seriously. And again, so that is the backdrop also, where it's like, man, I'm not pro-government. I'm somebody who can not be tinfoil hat about things like MK Ultra. I don't think the government is doing mind control on people. I do think the government tried to figure it out, though. I do know that cereal companies have put sawdust in their cereals and have spent a lot of money testing how much sawdust they could put in before the taste is different enough that people are going to have a problem with it. I do know that giant corporations, that institutions with unchecked power will abuse that power. I don't think the CIA are good guys. I know they've run coups to overthrow other democratically elected governments in other places because we didn't like those people, or it was too revolutionary for what we had in our slowly budding dystopia. But again, I think if you aren't a white dude, then America's been a dystopia since its founding. Which means it has been a dystopia since its founding. There is no exception just for white guys there. Be better. But again, this idea that I had to explain to people of an older generation that like what's going on now with like the trial of Anthony Fauci before Congress is not actual legitimate cause to relitigate the pandemic. It's a farce. It's a political show. And there's a number of issues going on in public health right now that need to be getting our attention that are not, because we're talking about what happened in 2020. When, let's check our notes real quick. Donald Trump was president the first time. So again, this sort of kangaroo court that's being pulled out in front of the headlines when like there's open corruption. Again, Taylor Farms was the place that most people and people in the scientific community had sort of said it's likely that this is where the outbreak started. The cyclosporidia. That's not right. I'm getting my Milwaukee in the 90s cryptosporidium outbreak mixed in here. The explosive diarrhea in the lettuce outbreak problem that we're having was it was coming out that it was Taylor Farms, right? It was being reported on in certain places. It was being tentatively reported in major media outlets. And the CEO went to the White House, gave Trump a gift, and then the CDC said, no, it wasn't them. That's not where it came from. So again, like blatant, overt corruption, we got to see a business leader do a bribe, and then the government changed its mind about something? Question mark. And again, I'm somebody who's, these things have always happened, but to have to explain to another person that you can't take the government even like whatever bit seriously you used to be able to. Again, they were lying. We've been the baddies throughout our history. We're not the heroes for even our own story, even our own propaganda. We're still the bad guys. Um, there's no version where we as the United States of America get to be the good guys. And the propaganda and the break with reality is so far gone that current CIA is so much worse than previous iterations of it. You know? I mean, the person I was trying to explain this to was like not following, because I think they are of a generation where America, we're the good guys, and that's not something that they're really readily going to be able to let go of. But I think it's partially an issue with the way that propaganda works. It's partially an issue though with the way that we've been taught and educated, that we recognize evil when it is sufficiently theatrical. It is the eye patch. It's the big scar. It's the hooved dude with a trident and little horns. Which, like, that veers into religious trauma as a topic, which I wasn't necessarily planning to branch out into. But, like, yes, the God of the Old Testament is a tyrant in pretty much every way you could describe a tyrant. It's an awful creature that would never be deserving of any worship. And he is a bad guy. And if you give him a white beard and a white robe, and you give the other guy that he created and also punishes for all of time a pointy trident and a pointy tail and questionable facial hair and the fact of a lot of pointy mustaches and goatees, I guess that's the bad guy, because he's red and the other guy's white. Dark and light. I don't know. As a species, we might have been an evolutionary aberration that is correcting itself by speedrunning our own annihilation. I don't even know that I'm opposed to that. The idea that, again, like, we can only recognize evil when it's appropriately theatrically evil is silly. And again, this sort of is like flattening of this effect, right? Because now every superhero story needs to have like a anti-hero and like a villain that at least is making a good point. Pro wrestling is rife with tweeners right now. That again is just not good storytelling. The good storytelling is happening in AEW for sure, if you need a good pro wrestling fix. But like, again, sometimes the simple story is still the best one to tell. Sometimes the person overcoming their personal issues and then beating the overtly bad guy is still entertaining, right? And I think some of that stuff is like missing. And I'm watching Batman and I'm seeing it, and like, this version of Batman doesn't kill anyone, but like, he is sort of violent. I mean, Batman's always violent. Batman at its core is a weird story, and one that I'm not willing to dissect for this purpose. But again, like, yeah, Batman goes after bank robbers, but Batman's also a billionaire. His parents are wealthy because his dad was a doctor, because once upon a time, doctors made really good money and could accumulate intergenerational wealth. And I'm not suggesting that doctors don't make good money now. I am suggesting that there's a difference between somebody who I see in my office who works in the medical field, is not unethically rich and also needs to keep working in order to afford their lifestyle. That's different than Zuckerberg and Bezos and that type of, again, comically evil person. Mark Cuban, Donald Trump. Again, Trump's a weird case because there's the reality check that, like, for a while he was not actually wealthy. And I would say up until this second presidency, he wasn't wealthy, in the sense that he was wildly over leveraged and he didn't actually have a successful business. The Apprentice is the only thing he ever really had his name on that made money. Fact checked me. That's a known thing. And again, is just enriched himself to a disgusting degree. Like, the wealth inequality is beyond what it was during the French Revolution. Like, we have really, 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 really lost the point. And I don't know, maybe Trump has to die of natural causes in his increased age and poor health. And then they'll weekend at Bernie's him like they're doing it with Mitch McConnell. But at some point, JD Vance takes over, and maybe, again, he's got the evil eyeliner going on. So maybe we'll be able to identify that as evil. But the Andor reference, the way that Andor used this title is, they don't have the decency to lie anymore. It's the final insult. When I see this sort of concept talked about is when relationships are beyond salvaging, where one partner is cheating on the other and they're not even having the decency to lie about having an affair. They just leave their affair partner's underwear on the ground and don't even bother to apologize for it, right? Like, that idea that it's in what's happening is wrong, and we're aware of that. A president doesn't have the power to declare war. That is in Congress, and so we're aware that the war in Iran is illegal and wrong right now, and also for ethical and moral reasons it's wrong. And also the idea that we're not even posturing with that, we're not even pretending. Again, it's not only is what's happening wrong, but now it's insulting. It's salt in the wound of this idea that something bad is happening. We know it's bad. We know it's wrong. We know it's morally incorrect. And also, we're just getting told to deal with it. It's sort of met with a, so what? You're not going to post your way. You're not going to hashtag your way out of this. We just don't care. We have accumulated enough power that we're insulated from this, which I don't think is true. And it's not going the right direction. The billionaires buying up all the media, somebody like Barry Weiss being put in charge at CBS, is like not a good thing. And that's like old news, right? Like that's not even it's not even current scandal. Yeah, I don't know. It was that conversation, and then again, like, something that's ideally an escape for me. And I'm not good at that personally. I'm support and am a little bit low-key envious of people who are capable of enjoying fiction without any analysis to the real world. I've not really been that way for a long time. I'll blame it partially on my neurodivergence and mostly on my parents, who were English teachers and so taught me how to read things critically from a very young age. But yeah, it's tough, and I've spoken about this at length before on the podcast, where like the Supreme Court is sort of the thing that makes me the most angry. I can see and deal with a lot of horrific things, one, in my work, and two, like just existing in modern times. But for me, for a long time, it was the Supreme Court, where it was just like, oh, you're like making laws, which isn't what you're supposed to do. The judicial branch isn't supposed to legislate, but that's absolutely what happens. So we have that, but we also then, like, you're deciding cases based on not factual information. Right. I'm a religious trauma person, so I'll use the Bremerton case, where you had a football coach who sued the school he was working for, the public school system he was working for, to be able to pray in his role as a public school football coach. And they said, well, we didn't say you couldn't pray. We definitely said you can't pray at the 50-yard line over the PA system and make all your players do it, because that's illegal. And the Supreme Court said, in spite of there being video evidence, more than we've got from Mitch McConnell, and photographic evidence, and just a ton of actual evidence, the Supreme Court ruled that you can't limit someone's prayer, and that a coach praying after a game is not something that can be limited, and that freedom of religion means that you can pray on the 50-yard line by yourself, even though that's not what the evidence was. It wasn't by himself. So again, that they can rule in cases where the evidence is directly opposing what they're claiming, and get to make up these sort of novel, nonsensical what if scenarios that they get to apparently rule for the rest of us on. The Supreme Court makes me really, really mad. Because again, it's just that break with reality. And it's one of those things where I'm not a nihilist about it, but it is a thing that I think I've changed a lot in my career, because it's something where that reality check has been an important part of my work for a lot of years. That assessing whether people are aware of time and place and their surroundings, and are they existing sort of in the same current time, present place and time? Are they aware of that, or is there a break with this reality? And I think that really grounded a lot of things, working with anxiety, working with depression. Like, there's a reality check there, because those things will lie to you. And so it's offensive to me. It's offensive to the work I do with the clients to be able to just say, we're powerful enough that we can ignore reality. Like, I have to work in the religious trauma spaces, and there's some therapists who are like, oh, well, we as therapists need to be neutral and we can't speak ill of religion, as if, like, I don't know, that's the same class of people who are like, we're therapists, so we can't be political. Those are just people who don't want to do their own work. Don't work with them. The idea that, like, right, to wander around and pretend like the church isn't harming everybody. Everybody's hyperbole. The church hasn't been a harmful institution since its inception. Better. That, like, the Catholic Church isn't the largest pedophile ring that we've ever known in public. It's just pretend that every time we drive past a Catholic church. I went to Marquette, it's a Jesuit institution, I guess not technically Catholic. But still, the Catholic Church a couple blocks away still rings its bells on Sunday morning. Like, why do I have to deal with that? I don't get to make that much noise worshiping what I find to be sacred. I don't get to go outside and ring giant bells every time I walk in the woods. I wouldn't, because don't do loud noises. Other people don't want that. It's one of, not the only reason I hate fireworks. Don't be like that. Don't listen to your phone on full volume in public. You don't get to do that. Don't take your shitty little speaker out on the disc golf course. We don't want to listen to your music while we're outside throwing tiny circles at slightly larger circles. I've gone off course for talking about people taking their shitty little speakers out on the disc golf course. Church bells. That's what we got. I mean, again, to use a actual evil corporation like Disney as an example, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame movie, the religious guy's the bad guy in overt, obvious fashion. Why can we recognize that and we can't be like, this Donald Trump guy seems like a bad guy? Again, like, people who are good at reality TV, or Ronald Reagan, who was an actor first, like, maybe shouldn't be politicians. They're literally good at pretending and therefore lying to you. They're so good at it that you forget that they're lying to you. Maddening. Actually maddening. Maddening is in, like, crazy making, right? And I'm fine, for what it is. I'm well-resourced in terms of my mental and physical health. I have a lot of support. Like, I'm not losing my mind. It is maddening in the sense that this is going on. And again, I think in this, what's maddening right now is it's one of those things where you have to be like, well, this is obviously overtly terrible. And also, like, it was terrible before. Again, it's the back and forth of, like, not a conspiracy theorist, but right? Like, I believe in science and think the scientific method is really cool and works really well, and that Fauci did a ton of great work to save a lot of lives, and the vaccine is indisputably good for humanity. And, like, to be like, hey, the government is spying on you, and also a ton of you voted for that, doesn't mean I'm anti-science. Doesn't make me like tinfoil conspiracy theorists. I don't think cryptids are real. And also, cryptids are cool. I wish they were real. And, right, like critical thinking skills still matter. This isn't some sort of like, the government's out to get you. Like, in the sense that the government has always been imperialist. Of course it's out to get you. It's what imperialism is. It's conquering you by force. ISIS killing United States citizens in our own country, within our borders. Why haven't we burned it metaphorically, allegedly down yet? Let's see. I don't want to jinx this, because when I, on my mental health podcast, prognosticate politically, I've almost always been wrong. I'm also not a superstitious person, so obviously it doesn't matter what I say and when it's recorded versus when it is published. But I have been pretty firmly team McConnell's dead. Just to put it out there for my listeners. He died a while ago, is my opinion. And if I was an unethical person, maybe I'd be on like some sort of poly market on that. I think you can't bet on people's deaths anymore. And while I do think that the world will be a better place when Mitch McConnell is not actively alive in it, and we know that for sure, it does seem pretty on brand for him to potentially be dead and still causing harm. That seems like a thing that would make his evil brain happy, as like an actual in the running of worst people in American history. Just the untold harm that guy did. We could not be here, specifically at various things that he was in charge of. It's really easy to be like, yeah, Mitch McConnell, super evil dude. But yeah, I've been on, he's dead. You just don't go that long without seeing somebody on camera. The photoshopped images that were released where he looked super healthy compared to how he's looked for the past 2 years. Not believable, actually. And yeah, I don't even think it needs to be AI. I just think Photoshop's really good. So yeah, putting it out there that I've been on team he's dead. And if I'm wrong about that, well, practice what I preach. We are all susceptible to confirmation bias. We are all susceptible to all sorts of biases. Propaganda is a really powerful thing. It's just upsetting that the propaganda is so lazy now. Not even trying. It's not even like fun to argue against. It's just, again, it's insulting. And if you don't feel insulted, figure it out. I don't need you to like know what MK Ultra is. I think it's fun. Not experimenting on people non-consensually. I think some of that stuff is fascinating. It's fascinating and horrific. Both those things can be true, I think. I don't need to defend my neurodivergent brain. It's my podcast. So, yeah, I don't know. I've been on Team McConnell's dead for a while, so I think that'll get announced soon. Trump's deep in dementia. His parents had pretty bad dementia before they died. So again, there's historical precedent in his family line that he's not long for the world either, from natural causes that I don't wish evil upon evil people. I wish evil upon evil people. I don't wish for them to die. Because I think life's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm recording before a big election in the primary here in Wisconsin. So again, I mean, some stuff's looking up. We have like evidence of there's better ways to govern. Look at like any of the global north that outperforms America on quality of life standards. And also, like, look at Mom Donnie doing cool stuff in New York. New York seems pretty happy to have elected him. He's getting a bunch of stuff done. It's pretty cool. Making people's lives better. What a novel idea. Again, like, that's just how dystopian we are. That, like, that's somehow an oddity and also a thing to be attacked. And, like, he did the things he said he was going to do when he ran for public elected office. There's talk of expanding our representation, which would be great. I don't think we're close to, like, overturning the electoral college or abolishing the Senate, but it's cool that, like, those things are even being talked about. Adding to the House of Representatives would be a big deal. So, you know, again, I'm not a nihilist about it. Like, I'm a cynical optimist. I think good things are certainly possible. I just don't believe they happen until we have evidence of them happening. It's not magical thinking. It's work to do. But yeah, can be better. Is where I land most days. And I think because it can be better, it is upsetting that it's not. Again, this is why this is maddening. That's why this is so insulting. The idea that we're so far gone, they don't even have the decency to lie anymore is upsetting. So let's kick them out and do something different. To err as human, we can learn from our mistakes to a point where we're not making those same mistakes anymore. That'd be cool. Again, I don't know that the human species has a long track record of that, but it remains possible. See? Optimist. We did it, team. We ended in a happy place. Sort of. But my life's cool. This weekend, I'll be doing the religious trauma retreat. If you're a regular listener, you've heard me talk about it a bit before. So if you want to fund any portion of that, you still can. That link will still be up on my website. And I have ideas for other future retreats, so that link will probably still be there. But if you're listening and you're like, hey, Jeremy could be bowling with a bunch of religious trauma survivors right now as part of a retreat, I should sponsor that. You head over to the website or drop down in the show notes wherever you're listening to this wonderful podcast, and you can donate. And if you're poor or just don't want to donate in spite of your financial situation, you can rate this podcast wherever you're listening to and leave reviews, because we're dystopian and you need to create engagement so people can find you. Even if you put out good, verifiable information as a licensed professional, it doesn't matter, because, I don't know, a reality TV star is the #1 podcaster in the world for some reason. We had ended on a positive place, and I've ruined it again. I am a ruiner. Somebody who pays attention to what's going on. Ruiner. All right. I have a guest for next week, so that's fun. We're back to positivity. Guest next week, talk about cults. That'll be a good time. So tune in for that. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. See you next week, y'all.